just seen what it is we're trying to accomplish in this segment. We have a completed model, we have a parts list, and now what we want to do is create some optimized layouts of our sheet material and then create the DXF files necessary to produce the G code for cutting this material on a CNC machine. That sounds like a pretty daunting process, but it isn't. It's actually quite simple. And we're going to show you how to accomplish that in this segment. Let's bring our cut list back in so we can take a look at it. Okay, in the last segment I mentioned one of the things you can do with Cut List Plus FX is print a label or labels for each of the parts. I'm going to do a print preview for you here just to see what that looks like. There's a little label setup here, and you can choose what it is that you want in the on the label. And I'm just going to print it out here on the screen. A couple things you might notice is the part numbers here. If there are two parts that are identical, such as this, you'll see that this is part 1 of 2 of C10-9, and this is part 2 of C10-9. And if there were a third one, there would be a label over here for the third one. The component name, which appears in the description column of Cut List Plus FX, is shown here. The dimensions of this part here. These are the overall dimensions, the bounding box dimensions, if you will. Recall we put a note in our model. Let's see if we can go find that. Here's our note right here. It said, "This is a blind cabinet." On the printout, I'll show you where that will appear. Notice right here, right at the bottom, this is a blind cabinet. So notes will appear here. You don't want to make them too long because all of a sudden you'll run out of space and they won't be completely printed. But you can put notes on each part or any parts you wish, and they'll show up on the printed out label. Okay, let's go back to our cut list. In addition to creating and managing a cut list, Cut List Plus FX, as we saw before, provides a bunch of layout optimizations. For instance, for the maple plywood pre-finished 3/4 inch material, it produces a bunch of layouts that requires only 12 sheets of plywood. And as you look at these layouts, you'll see that there's very little wasted material. And one of the nice things that you can do with offcuts in Cut List Plus FX is you can put pieces like this back into your inventory. All you have to do is specify their size, put them back into inventory, and they can be used for other projects. Notice that this requires 12 sheets of the maple plywood pre-finished 3/4 inch material. Let's remember that. 12 sheets, an even dozen. Now, in addition to this, Cut List Plus FX does a lot of things that allows you to manage inventory, create project costing, and manage raw material costs and labor and what have you. So it's a very powerful and useful tool. It is especially powerful if you're going to cut things on the table, so as we saw in the last segment. But it is also useful to use it in the process when you are doing CNC cutting. because of these other features. But let's see what happens if we're going to do CNC cutting. Let's see what else we need in the process. I want to go back to our original project. This is our model that we're working on, and it resides in a folder called CabWriter Segment 6. This is the model file. This is the file that we've been using with Cutlass Plus FX. It's the one that produced the cut list that we're looking at. This is a file that could be used if we wish to produce our cut list in either Excel or OpenOffice Calc. I've not demonstrated that to you, but all you have to do is import the CSV file into either one of those programs. And the nice thing about that is it's very inexpensive, especially OpenOffice Calc, which is free. But if you're good with spreadsheets, if you know how to use spreadsheets and create formulas and things like that, you can produce your own very interesting costing sheets and inventory control and what have you. But we're going to stick with Cutlass Plus FX. Now notice there's only 3 files here in this folder. Remember that Cutlass Bridge puts its files in the same folder as the model. Now let me just set this aside for a moment. Back in the early segments, I asked you to create a number of scenes. One of them was for the cut list export, this one here. We also created one for the DXF export. The difference is that only the sheet good material exists in this scene. Now there's a number of different sizes of sheet goods. For instance, the back are 1/2-inch plywood, as are the draw separators here. The ladders down here are shop plywood, what I call shop plywood. That's leftover pieces of plywood, scrap plywood, and what have you. Those aren't going to be seen, and they're underneath the cabinet, so you can use almost anything you want down here. But my point is that there's a number of different types of plywood in here and different thicknesses. We need to create a DXF file for each type and thickness. But it's a fairly easy thing to do. It's a very easy thing to do. All we have to do with Cutlass Bridge is say select all, and in the file menu choose Cutlass Bridge, export to DXF. Now when I click this, you will notice that a second or so later the color will disappear and the model will return to its normal color. Okay, the moment that happened, Cutlass Bridge put a folder in our model, right where our model is, the same folder as our model, CabWriter Segment 6. It put another folder, also called the same thing as the model name, CabWriter Segment 6 Training. And in that folder, it put a file, a DXF file, for each of the various types of plywood in the model. For instance, the 1/2-inch maple plywood pre-finished. That's largely the backs. 3/4-inch maple plywood pre-finished. That's mainly the sides, bottoms, shelves, and things like that. 3/4-inch maple plywood that has no finish. And 3/4-inch shop plywood, which is used for the ladder. So now we have 4 DXF files. We're going to look at one of these, and we're going to optimize the layout and show you how to produce that optimized layout. And the one we're going to focus on is the 3/4-inch maple plywood pre-finished. Okay, now Cutlass Bridge's job is pretty much done. It produced a .csv file. Should we wish to have a cut list produced in either OpenOffice Calc or Microsoft Excel. It produced a .cwx file if we want to produce a cut list in cut list plus FX. It also produced 4 .gxf files. These files need to be converted to G code for a specific CNC machine. Now there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of CNC machines out there, and while they all speak G code, their commands are slightly different and they're not compatible. So what we need is an application that will bridge the DXF files to the G code for a specific CNC machine. There are lots of these applications on the market. The one we like is Cut2D Pro by Vectric. You can download it, a free trial version, from vectric.com. And that's what I'm going to use here to demonstrate this to you. I'm going to open that application. And here it is. All I need to do is create a new file, set up my job size. I've already set this up. When you first open it, there'll be something like 10 inches in here and half an inch here. I changed it to 96.5 and 48.5. Those are the dimensions of typical finished plywood. A little over 8 feet and a little over 4 feet. And of course they're in inches. So I say OK. Now I want to open my DXF file. So I will say import vectors. And I've got to go to my desktop and find my files here. And the one we're going to concern ourselves with is the 3/4 inch maple plywood pre-finished. So I'll select that and say open. Notice there's one sheet of plywood here, but if I zoom out, actually these aren't sheets of plywoods, they're actually the individual parts, and there's quite a few of them. If I keep zooming out, there's a large number of parts here. So the next thing I want to do is to create the nest of selected objects and preview it. By the way, one of the important things here that I've selected is rotate parts to find best fit, rotation step angle 180 degrees. I don't want parts rotated 90 degrees because then the grain will be wrong. So I've changed this from 90 degrees to 180 degrees. And I say preview. Now it's got some work to do down the bottom here as it optimizes all of this. And I'll say view, zoom to drawing. Now what I have here is all the sheets of plywood that are required for this pre-finished maple 3/4 inch. I can select each of these layouts and see it down here. And if I want, I can zoom in here. Notice on each part is the part number and the part name. This is cabinet 3, part 3. Cabinet 12, part 6. And then it's cabinet 12, upper, box 1, top. And so these have been optimized and laid out. And an interesting thing is, if you notice, there are a requirement here of 11 sheets. Recall that when we did our optimization for the cut list plus FX, it required 12 sheets. The difference primarily is the way this lays things out. This uses the actual shape of the part. Notice these corner cabinet parts, how it fit those together. Cutlass Plus FX only deals with the bounding box dimensions to lay parts out. And so it cannot place them quite as efficiently as this application does. And so we've saved one sheet of plywood, which, by the way, finished plywood means we saved about $100. So it doesn't take long to pay for this program. So if we have a CNC machine, or we're renting time on a CNC machine, this application pays for itself very, very quickly. So here we have it. Now all we have to do is complete the nesting and create the G-code. Now, I'm not going to teach you how to use Cut 2D Pro or any of the other DXF to G-code applications. That's not something that we do. You need to choose your own application for that and learn how to use it. But CabWriter has brought you to this point and produced all of the G-code, or the DXF files rather, that produced the G-code in that application. And that's pretty much what we want to cover. So I hope this tutorial has given you a good look into CabWriter and Cutlass Bridge. I think you'll agree that this is a fairly inexpensive and easy way to produce custom cabinet designs and to minimize material waste and produce the files that you need to either cut these custom cabinets on the table saw or CNC machines. So for now, have a good day.